The Radioactive Boy Scout, the story of David Charles Hahn. David's life was a story of relentless curiosity, one that blurred the line between brilliance and danger. Born in 1976 in Gulf Manor, Michigan, David was the type of child whose imagination outpaced his surroundings. The only child of Ken Hahn, a General Motors engineer, and Patty Hahn, a homemaker, David grew up with a fascination for science that would eventually consume him. This is not the story of an ordinary boy. It is the tale of a teenager who built a nuclear reactor in a backyard shed, fueled by obsession, ingenuity, and an unquenchable desire to push the limits of what seemed possible. Chapter 1. The Spark of Genius. David was no ordinary child. He was a bookworm, constantly thumbing through encyclopedias and science manuals, eager to absorb knowledge about the world and the invisible forces that governed it. At the age of 10, he received the Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments as a gift. The vibrant illustrations and daring experiments detailed within were a revelation. Unlike modern textbooks, this guide urged young readers to experiment with fire, acids, and even gases like chlorine, all in their backyard. David was hooked. His bedroom transformed into a laboratory, a place where chemicals bubbled and hissed while he scribbled notes in dog-eared journals. He learned through trial and error, and when his first attempts ended in small explosions or ruined furniture, he simply tried again. But David wasn't content with basic chemistry. His hunger for knowledge grew insatiable, and by the time he joined the Boy Scouts, his mind had turned toward the mysteries of nuclear energy. Chapter 2. The Impossible Dream. By the time he reached high school, David's scientific curiosity had evolved into an obsession. He idolized the great physicists of the 20th century, Marie Curie, Enrico Fermi, and Richard Feynman. He was particularly captivated by the idea of nuclear power, the idea that atoms, the smallest building blocks of the universe, could unleash massive energy ignited something in him. In 1991, at the age of 14, David set his sights on an extraordinary goal. He would build a nuclear reactor. This wasn't idle fantasy. David believed he could achieve what even seasoned scientists struggled to perfect. He wanted to build a breeder reactor, a device capable of generating fissile material, plutonium or uranium-233, from more common radioactive isotopes. His ambition bordered on the delusional, but David didn't see limitations. He saw only possibilities. Chapter 3. Scavenging the Atom. To build his reactor, David needed radioactive materials. These weren't items a high schooler could purchase at a local hardware store, but David had a knack for deception. He crafted a persona, a fictional scientist named Professor Hahn. With this persona, he began contacting companies, government agencies, and scientific organizations, pretending to be an academic conducting research. His letters and phone calls exuded confidence, and few people questioned his requests. Americium-241. David scavenged americium from smoke detectors. He purchased dozens of them, pried them open, and carefully extracted the tiny radioactive dots inside. It was tedious, delicate work, but David was patient. Thorium, camping lantern mantles, became David's next target. In the 1990s, these mantles still contained thorium oxide, a radioactive compound. David purchased hundreds of mantles from camping supply stores and burned them in a coffee can to extract thorium ash. Radium. Antique clocks with glow-in-the-dark faces were David's source for radium. He painstakingly scraped the paint off old clock dials, gathering small amounts of the dangerous element. Uranium. David learned that uranium could be found in black ore samples sold by geological supply companies. He ordered several pounds of ore, which he ground into a fine powder and processed to isolate the uranium. His ability to obtain these materials was both astonishing and terrifying. Each substance added another piece to the puzzle of his reactor. Chapter 4. Building the Beast. David's laboratory was a dilapidated shed in his father's backyard. By day, it was an unremarkable structure. By night, it became the workshop of a teenage alchemist. Inside, shelves sagged under the weight of chemicals, tools, and homemade contraptions. It was chaotic, but in David's mind, every item had a purpose. The core of his reactor was constructed from radioactive isotopes, carefully arranged in layers to replicate the design of a real breeder reactor. He surrounded this core with aluminum foil, which he hoped would reflect neutrons and intensify the chain reaction. To moderate the reaction, David used blocks of carbon. He scavenged carbon rods from ordinary batteries, cracking them open with pliers and assembling them into crude shielding for his reactor. For a neutron source, he used beryllium strips combined with the americium he had extracted from smoke detectors. David's understanding of nuclear physics wasn't perfect, but his intuition and resourcefulness were extraordinary. He used a Geiger counter, another device he obtained through questionable means, to monitor radiation levels. The counter confirmed what David already suspected. The reactor was working. It was a moment of triumph, a vindication of everything he had learned. But with that success came a sobering realization. The Geiger counter readings were off the charts. Radiation was seeping through the shed walls and into the surrounding yard. David wasn't just playing with fire. He was holding a lit torch in a powder keg. Chapter 5. The Fallout. As the radiation levels climbed, David began to understand the magnitude of what he had done. The reactor was dangerous, and he lacked the tools or the training to control it. Fearing exposure, he dismantled the device and packed the radioactive components into his car, hoping to dispose of them discreetly. But fate intervened. On August 31, 1994, police in Clinton Township were called to investigate a suspicious vehicle. When they searched David's car, they found a cache of radioactive materials and homemade equipment. Alarmed, the police contacted the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. EPA officials, clad in hazmat suits, descended on David's backyard. They found the shed to be a miniature Chernobyl, emitting radiation levels 1,000 times above normal background levels. The structure and its contents were declared a Superfund site, dismantled, and transported to a secure nuclear waste facility in Utah. Chapter 6. The Genius and the Tragedy. David's story became a media sensation. Dubbed the Radioactive Boy Scout, he was both celebrated and vilified. Some admired his ingenuity, while others condemned his recklessness. For David, the attention was devastating. He had wanted to be a scientist, a pioneer like his heroes. Instead, he was painted as a dangerous eccentric. His dream of working in nuclear physics evaporated. In the years that followed, David struggled. He joined the Navy, seeking structure and purpose, but was honorably discharged. Depression and addiction haunted him. In 2007, he was arrested for attempting to steal smoke detectors, a heartbreaking echo of his teenage experiments. On September 27, 2016, David Hahn died at the age of 39 from alcohol poisoning. The radioactive materials he had spent his youth chasing may have contributed to his early demise, but his death was more a result of a life marked by isolation and unfulfilled potential. Epilogue, a cautionary tale. David Hahn's story is a modern parable about the power of curiosity and the dangers of ambition unmoored from guidance. His reactor, built with scavenged materials and boundless determination, was both a marvel and a catastrophe. In the end, David's life is a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge, while noble, must be tempered by wisdom, mentorship, and an understanding of its consequences. His reactor may be gone, but his story continues to resonate, a tale of a boy who dared to split the atom and paid the price.